today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It was officially announced earlier today by none other than Netflix themselves. Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano III. Live on Netflix Friday, July 11th. After two epic clashes, it all comes down to this. Taylor and Serrano will shatter records once more when they headline the first ever all-women's professional boxing card at the Madison Square Garden in New York City.
We knew this was coming. We knew they've been working on a trilogy all this time.
The third fight, like the second, will be promoted by Most Valuable Promotions and distributed by Netflix. One might be left to wonder, why isn't Matchroom promoting it and why isn't DAZN distributing it? Put simply, because Netflix is a bigger platform that's putting up more money for it.
Yeah, DAZN's big in the world of combat sports, but in a very general sense, Netflix is bigger, many times bigger than DAZN, and they are willing to pay to play.
The reason for it is because of all the success from the first fight. And who promoted that one?
Matchroom.
Of course, Most Valuable Promotions was involved, but they were still new to the sport of boxing then. In many ways, they're still new to it now. The success from the first fight is what led to this, and the first fight was primarily promoted by Matchroom.
You don't arrive at a destination with no regard for what it took to get there.
I don't imagine Clarissa Shields will be none too pleased to hear that both Katie and Amanda are headlining a huge show on a huge platform here stateside when she was just harping about the viewing figures from their second fight.
How they don't count.
Because they were on Jake Paul's undercard. They weren't the ones headlining, as if that changes how many people saw them fight. I think the number was 60 million or just somewhere in that neighborhood.
She didn't like that.
So I don't imagine she's gonna like this. Netflix maintains some interest in hosting boxing matches, but very big ones, big events. Whether or not they want to start developing talent,
that's something else. And what is their foray into hosting live events, live television. I remember when Netflix started out.
A postmodern version of Blockbuster Video with DVDs and subsequently streaming movies. They've grown so much. They're a giant now.
Powerhouse to where hosting this fight on their platform almost guarantees that millions upon millions of people are going to see it.
On what is an all-women's boxing show, exposure for all those fighters set to appear on the undercard, some of which I already know their names, but I was instructed to keep a lid on it, and that's what I'm doing.
That information will be divulged shortly.
Thus, big things are still happening in the world of women's boxing and helping to normalize that conversation and the idea that two women can put on just as good, if not a better show than two men.
And the continued efforts of Most Valuable Promotions to establish themselves as a powerhouse within the world of boxing with Netflix behind them.
I love what they're doing. At a time where some fear that women's boxing may end up taking the back seat.
End up on the back burner.
Due to continued Saudi involvement in the world of boxing, all of those cultural differences and their presence being felt. Reference to Turki Alalshikh, Dana White, and Nick Khan's upcoming boxing league. The ins and outs, the intricacies, and how this might affect the women's game. Ever since Turkey's entry into the sport of boxing, there have been growing concerns that cultural differences between Saudi Arabia and the West would lead to a stagnant women's boxing scene, that the women may be alienated.
Because of the cultural differences.
Going to assume that Turki Alalshikh and Dana White and Nick Khan's boxing league, this promotion won't primarily operate in Saudi, it will operate in the West. So will they create opportunities for women boxers? It would seem that everybody else is. Matchroom still does, and so does Most Valuable Promotions.
So does Golden Boy.
So does Boxer. Will this TKO boxing league afford women the same chance to box on a major platform? There's a chance that they might, because we know the WWE.
They're all part of the same conglomerate, the WWE, UFC.
They make their own contribution in their own way, and they have for years, whether you're talking about a Nikita Lyons or a Valerie Lareda, years ago, a China,
Trish Stratus.
And there have been others, to where the idea that TKO boxing might also afford opportunities to women boxers is not far-fetched. You think about Dana White. and how he helped to popularize women in combat sports, most famously with his promotion of Ronda Rousey.
And there were others.
She was a game changer. Anybody that saw her meteoric rise would know that, and there were others like Aisha Tate, Chris Cyborg, Amanda Nunes, Valentina Shevchenko, Grasso.
There were others.
To where the idea that TKO boxing might also sign a stable of women boxers, promote women's boxing, is not far-fetched. Now, there's been no mention of it, but it would be in keeping with the decorum of boxing today.
Almost every promotional outfit out there has a woman boxer or women boxers signed to their stable, whether you're talking about Matchroom, Queensberry, Boxer, Golden Boy, Top Rank.
The smaller outfits do, like GBM, Dimitri Salita, Tom Loeffler's 360 Promotions. It's normalized now. So, the idea that TKO might keep up with the Joneses and sign their own stable of female fighters does not seem far-fetched to me. Not when you see two of the three guys at the helm in Nick Khan and Dana White.
We haven't heard it mentioned officially by anyone, though when you see Dana White and Nick Khan are at the helm, it's not far-fetched at all, because they understand the value the women bring to the table, perhaps more so than many people in boxing.
There are lots of questions that need answers when it comes to this TKO boxing league, but I do get the sense they might sign some female fighters and keep the ball rolling for the women. Though not everyone is receiving this news and their endeavor into the world of boxing with open arms. Former champion turned analyst Paulie Malignaggi had some not so nice things to say about Dana White.
Ex-world champion rips Dana White's entry into boxing, saying that he's a pig and dishonest.
As opposed to all the honest and stand-up guys we see in boxing, right?
Right.
Because everybody in boxing's a Boy Scout, eh, Paulie? There is some criticism over how White operates. He's been accused of not paying fighters enough. Unlike boxers who are currently enjoying big paydays from the Saudis, boxers also have more freedom over their careers in deciding who they face. However, under the UFC, White has more centralized control, with fighters not having the chance to duck each other.
Is that what you would prefer, Paulie?
If they want to progress, Paulie Malignaggi is unhappy with this collaboration as he questioned whether White is the right man to take boxing to the next stage. Why would you align with a guy like Dana White who has such a bad reputation for being a pig with the way he pays his fighters?
Maybe it's because of all the success that he's had with his brand, Paulie.
I've met a lot of MMA fighters. I'm actually friends with more MMA fighters than I am boxers, ironically, because the MMA fans really don't like me due to the past situations with Conor McGregor.
It is true that over the years, Dana White has developed a reputation for underpaying his athletes, underpaying his fighters, and the fear now is that it'll be the same thing in boxing, but that's really only the boxers that decide to sign to him.
Said it in my previous video that the boxers that are worth anything, worth any money, can afford attorneys that will revise their contracts to where if they don't like the way a deal looks, they don't sign it. So that if that is what Dana White's trying to now do in boxing, it will inhibit how many fighters he can acquire. Unless he's not looking for big names, he's not looking for established ones, he's looking to develop prospects. At which point, it's a different conversation.
Why?
That's what Eddie Hearn speculated, that they're not looking to acquire big names, they're looking to develop them.
Paulie doesn't like it.
He doesn't like that Dana is now endeavoring into the world of boxing, saying, I have never, with MMA fighters, I have never heard a single good thing said about Dana White. It's either no comments at all, where he doesn't come up in the conversation, and when he does come up in the conversation, they cannot stand the guy. They don't like the guy. He's a dishonest prick, and so on and so forth.
Not saying that Paulie is wrong, because I hear the same things that he hears. It's just that you could hear those exact same things about people in boxing.
What Canelo Alvarez has to say about Oscar De La Hoya, what a good number of top-ranked fighters have had to say about Top Rank and the people there.
Teofimo criticized Top Rank, Shakur Stevenson criticized Top Rank, Terrence Crawford criticized Top Rank, that it's not one way.
To where, when you tell me that there are a lot of people that don't like Dana White, I could say the same thing about Bob Arum. I could say the same thing about Oscar De La Hoya, Eddie Hearn, Todd do both. So how is it different when it involves Dana White? Paulie Malignaggi continued, so I'm just going by what the people in the world have told me. Now, I've dealt with Dana myself. He knows how to kiss ass, Malignaggi said.
Let's establish that I'm not exactly a fan of Dana White or his UFC. I don't watch it. I'm just evaluating the situation that when you say these things about Dana, you could literally say them about anybody else in boxing. So what makes him different?
Saw Jedi Goodman say, I'm looking forward to Dana giving Canelo and Crawford $50,000 each for the fight of the night post-fight bonus. Highlighting the same thing, that Dana's fighters in the UFC don't make anywhere near what boxers make because boxers have more autonomy. And I don't think that all of a sudden changes now that he's coming into boxing. It really only affects what fighters decide to sign to him.
What fighters are we really talking about? Prospects?
Not guys that are making the kind of money that Canelo Alvarez makes or that Terence Crawford makes. Just feels like I have to repeat myself that the fighters that are used to making certain dollar amounts can afford attorneys to revise their contracts to where if Dana were to offer them a deal and they don't like it, they can walk. They can go somewhere else, sign to someone else.
And the people that feel that this is a betrayal, that Turki will now turn on the same promoters that he's been working with for a little over a year now.
Turki, when he said crush, we're going to crush all the other promotions. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
But one second, the promotions you've been working with?
I said to you the Times Square in the 2nd of May, and there is small cards in the end of June in Alcatraz jail in San Francisco, and maybe me and
that's great.
Maybe me and Dana keep some promoter there.
Okay,
in the jail after the event.
As in Queensbury and Matchroom and Golden Boy and Top Rank? Like, what does that mean? I find it interesting. I find it puzzling.
What's puzzling?
What does it mean? Does it mean, okay, or does it almost mean kind of what PBC tried to do, where they were trying to create a PBC belt and they tried to sign every single fighter and they very well nearly exceeded in doing so? Does this mean that he's trying to literally take over the sport of boxing? So all the fighters, all of them are in this league?
The implications of what Turki is saying, and saying it alongside Dana White, there are those who don't like the look of this. Veteran manager Rick Ramos has a theory. He said, I think the job of running the league was offered to someone else. I think when Turki laid out his plan, this guy said no. I think at that point, Turki knew he needs a hard-nosed guy who isn't afraid to make enemies to fulfill his plans. If it doesn't work out, Dana could go back to his UFC. The original guy is a boxing guy. If it didn't work out, he had nowhere to go.
It's not a bad theory. I mean, why did Turki go to Dana? For this. You're in bed with every boxing guy, practically every boxing guy. Why would you go to Dana for a league?
One would think that you would go with someone who's more familiar with the sport of boxing, the industry of boxing, than Dana White. It's not to say that Dana's not successful and good at what he does, but what he does is inside of the UFC bubble where he has all the control. It's not like that in boxing. So why would you go with him?
So when you say that this new boxing promotion, this league, is going to crush everything, who is it that you mean to crush?
The same promoters that you've been working with for over a year? Did the deal go sour and now these guys don't want to play ball? Are they his competition? No. Mr. Moonshine said, Promoter Aladdin is pulling the rug from underneath you and you know it. Sanctioning bodies, you will be out as well.
It's a curious assessment, because when you go to Ring Magazine's website that is now owned by Turki Alalshikh, all 4 sanctioning bodies are listed as partners.
Where some now believe that it's Turki's intention to cut them out. So much to address, so much to unpack. Addressing that potentiality, not even saying that it's true, but let's just say that it is. The conversation.
Can he do it?
I think it'll take more than a fledgling boxing league, and Dana White, who's not even really a boxing guy, to get rid of the WBC, the WBO, the WBA, and the IBF?
Why?
If it is now Turkey's intention to compete with the same promoters that he's been working with, and a part of that strategy is cutting out the alphabets, you can't do that alone, even with all of your money. You can't do that by yourself, and you can't do it with Dana, because so long as there are other fighters fighting for those belts that the audience is already familiar with,
Under promotional banners that the audience is already familiar with.
for titles that the audience is already familiar with, you can't hope to establish a rapport without that familiarity.
Huh?
Your boxing league will seem alien and generic to the boxing community at large without that familiarity.
Meanwhile, you got a familiar face, a familiar fighter fighting for a WBC, a WBA, or whatever kind of title that the audience already knows, while Dana's guys are doing what and fighting who?
For better or worse, I think getting rid of the alphabet organizations is a lot more difficult than people realize because of familiarity. There is an established rapport there.
And lineage, history, that you can't hope to duplicate with some fledgling boxing league.
This is all on the presupposition that they want to cut them out. I don't know that they do, but that's what some people think. So addressing that,
Easier said than done.
addressing the elephant in the room, if it is now Turkey's intention to turn against the same promoters he's been working with, using Dana White as the point man, it'll take a lot more than that.
Because Dana and this fledgling league doesn't have the rapport with the boxing fans that the other promoters do.
And this is all on the predication that it's the way some people say it is, and Turkey has now turned on the same promoters he was just working with.
That doesn't even mean it's true.
But if he's not working with them now, and they're all going their separate ways or whatever it is, he himself doesn't have the rapport with the Brits, for example, that Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren have.
Dana White is no substitute for that.
It's the same with the Americans. Americans don't go to Dana White for their boxing fix. So there'd be enough work that needs doing with this fledgling boxing league that I don't think they'd be competition for the established promotional outfits within the sport.
If they are standing apart, once again,
We don't know that they are. That's just what some people think. For all we know, this league exists separately from Turkey's other endeavors involving other promoters because he seems to want to work with everyone. He seems to have brought everyone to the table. He's got a lot of fingers and a lot of pies.
I wouldn't rush to assumption. There is still too much that we don't know to jump to these bold conclusions.
I'd rather take a wait and see approach.